This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Philadelphia to Erie and from Pittsburgh to Scranton, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewald, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host, Mara Donnelly. Welcome, Mara.
Hello, Charlie.
Why, what's new with you?
Oh, just laying low.
Oh, I thought you were going to Penn State games again.
No, actually, no. I can't believe they aren't super spreaders, but no, not going.
Well, we are going to actually talk about something different than vaccines and viruses today. Isn't that a nice relief?
It's good news.
Yes, and for this discussion, we have a very special guest.
We do.
We have a very special guest today, Carl Morera. Carl is the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. And we're going to be talking about the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Carl, let's start for a minute. Some of our viewers need to be perhaps refreshed on what the PMA is.
Sure.
What is the PMA, and how long has it been around, and what does it do?
Well, thank you first for having me. The Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association is the more than a century-old trade organization representing all of the different people in Pennsylvania that make all of the different things. So everything from candy bars to helicopters to steel tubing. We try to represent the entire manufacturing sector, and it represents over 500,000 people on shop floors, but it sustains millions of additional jobs in Pennsylvania through supply chains, distribution networks, and vendors of industrial services. And manufacturing has the greatest multiplier effect of any single industry in Pennsylvania. So it truly is the engine that drives Pennsylvania's economy.
What part of Pennsylvania are you from? What's your background?
I'm originally from Danville, Pennsylvania, so I'm kind of from we're a little bit confused. We don't know whether we're north central or northeast Pennsylvania, but Danville, Pennsylvania is originally home, and I now live in Mechanicsburg.
Mm-hmm. And how did you come to the PMA?
I got to the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. I've spent pretty much my entire career in business advocacy. So I started with the Pennsylvania Business Council, briefly moved to the Pennsylvania Pharmacists Association, and then landed here at PMA. Dave Taylor, our president and CEO, has always been such a great friend and is my biggest mentor. And I've been here for about 10 years now.
Okay.
Wow. That's great.
Laura?
Well, I think we're going to tackle a pretty big issue here today in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what that initiative is and what's the status of Pennsylvania in that initiative now?
So the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is a collection of states that have all signed a compact or entered into a compact that has an organization that sets a price for emitting carbon. It's an auction price. Pennsylvania is not currently a member of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It includes a lot of the Northeast states that you would probably think would be a part of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, states like New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. What's funny is none of the states that are currently a part of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative are energy producers. States like Ohio, West Virginia, are not a part of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Governor Wolf is acting unilaterally via executive order and through the regulatory process to enter Pennsylvania into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And what's kind of unique about that is no other state has done it that way. Every other state has worked through their General Assembly to enter their state into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And really, why is that? Because it's a huge shift in energy policy. We think it's the single largest shift in energy policy since the deregulation of the market in 1996. This is a major change for Pennsylvania energy producers, and I think it should be treated as such and probably entered into through the General Assembly if it's entered into at all, which we would advocate strongly against, which we can get into those reasons. But the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is exactly that it sets these prices in auction for an atom of carbon, and then the energy producers in those states have to purchase those credits in order to produce electricity.
Sounds a little bit like a tax.
It is very much a tax. And in fact, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania views a tax. Really, there's two things that government can do, right? They can institute a fee or they can institute a tax. And a fee, what Pennsylvania's Supreme case law has said is that a fee covers the expenses to implement a specific program. So if the revenue that was brought in through the entering into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and those carbon credits covered just the cost of entering into that program, that could maybe be constituted as a fee. But anything beyond that is really a tax. It's also a part of the Pennsylvania Constitution that the General Assembly and the General Assembly alone has the power to institute a tax in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So we very much feel that the revenue that the Wolf administration thinks it's going to bring in through these this carbon tax is far beyond the scope of what it would cost to implement this program, is thus a tax, and therefore the governor does not have the authority to do this on his own, and it will surely be litigated.
Carl, there are people at home right now that can't swallow and that are probably quite mystified as to how this could even occur. What's going on in the legislature and on the part of individual legislators and the leadership of the legislature to keep the governor from usurping this power?
Well, I think that people at home need to realize that this is ultimately going to impact them, that this carbon tax is going to result in, and this is DEP's modeling and also through Penn State University, that this is going to cost electric consumers in Pennsylvania $2.6 billion with a B, dollars over the next 9 years in their electric bills. Because when those carbon tax, when the carbon tax is instituted and those credits are purchased, that money's got to be made up somewhere, and that comes from you, it comes from me. But think of large industrial users. You know, we think of ourselves as turning on the lights or turning on our stoves or heating our homes, and that being an energy user. But think about a manufacturing plant where the electricity bill or the energy bill can be over $1 million every month. Now increase that by 10 to 15%, which is what we think is ultimately going to happen as a result of entering into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And that's a lot of money. And that creates an uncompetitive environment for businesses and an uncertain environment for businesses to come and locate and invest here in Pennsylvania. So lawmakers, I think, have taken notice. We're a part of a coalition called the Power PA Jobs Coalition. It's us and the AFL-CIO. It's the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance alongside the United Mine Workers. This is a coalition that is unprecedented. I mean, the breadth and the scope politically that this coalition that we've put together is unlike anything that I've certainly seen in my time in Harrisburg, and I think there's very good reason for that. And as we've been educating the public, they've been reaching out to their lawmakers. Thousands upon tens of thousands of letters have been sent to lawmakers throughout this process. And they're taking notice, and they're starting to, I think, push back against the governor, and we've seen that with the most recent bill. It's Senate Bill 119, sponsored by Senator Pittman of Indiana County, who has a number of coal-fired plants in his district that will be shut down pretty much immediately if this goes through. And we're talking thousands of jobs at these, hundreds of jobs at the plants themselves, but thousands of jobs supporting them. But also, you know, think of the manufacturing jobs that are around that rely on reliable and affordable energy. This is a really big deal for legislators like that. Senate Bill 116, Senate Bill 119, sponsored by Senator Pittman, passed the Pennsylvania Senate 35-15. That is a supermajority vote. There are a number of Democrats that did cross over and voted for that initiative. It's currently in the House of Representatives. We're also going to see joint resolutions passed in both chambers. It's really the only kind of recourse that the General Assembly has to try to stop a regulatory action of a governor. So both chambers would have to pass the exact same resolution. That would go to the governor. He would surely veto that, so we would again need a supermajority or 34 votes in the Senate in order to make sure that the General Assembly has a voice in this process.
So natural gas is huge in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
What impact, if any, is this going to have on
Well, here's the most telling thing, right? Pennsylvania's natural gas abundance has created hosts of new natural gas-fired power plants, and that's actually helped.
And jobs.
Yes, and lowered emissions. We've lowered emissions in the power sector by more than 20% in just the last decade. The reason for that is the utilization of natural gas, not because of solar panels or windmills. But natural gas has actually cut emissions drastically while giving us a very affordable and reliable energy source. There has not been a single investment in a new natural gas-fired power plant since the governor introduced the RGGI regulation. However, it looks almost like a game of Risk. You look at the border of West Virginia and Ohio, and they're lined up like soldiers. New power plants being built as we speak in West Virginia and Ohio, knowing that if we enter into RGGI, that they're going to be able to sell us electricity cheaper than we can make it for ourselves. So we lose the jobs. We lose the energy production in Pennsylvania.
The tax revenue.
And we lose the tax revenue. And we have to buy energy from other states because we can't afford to make it here ourselves.
And this governor has a PhD. It's just unbelievable.
It's mind-boggling.
Yes.
It surely is. Carl, you have to come back and you have to tell us more about this, because I still think that there are lots of people at home who just can't believe that the governor can usurp the basic power structure in relationship with the legislature. But then you look at the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court, and they sort of follow the tune of the governor, don't they?
Well, we're going to continue to advocate to make sure that the General Assembly has a piece of this process for sure. Again, we don't think that this is a good idea holistically for Pennsylvania to enter into. In fact, Pennsylvania is the one currently that's selling energy to RGGI states. We've lowered our emissions at rates faster than some of them while supplying them energy. So this is a uniquely bad idea for Pennsylvania, and we will make sure that we continue to advocate that it is ultimately not brought to fruition.
Mara, you brought this subject to our attention and couldn't be more timely. We're so glad that you were with us, Carl.
Thank you.
And you hope that you will continue to be with us in the next segment of Behind the Headlines. We'll be right back.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Hi, welcome back to Behind the Headlines. On this segment, we find that Mara will not be able to join me. She's on assignment. But nonetheless, we're happy to have a very beloved guest of ours and someone who has his pulse on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and that's Dave Sanko. Dave, of course, is the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. Dave, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Charlie.
It's
Appreciate
nice
the
to have
opportunity
you.
to be here.
Well, yeah, there's some things that we should talk about. Your association has now been around for a century. It's 100 years old. I think that Willard Scott would be telling us about it if he hadn't passed away recently.
I think earlier this year, May 5th, marked the 100th anniversary of the legislation signed by Governor Sproul in 1921. So the association was created by an act of the legislature, actually. So it is in law that this association exists, and it was created back then to help govern. The thought was that there were a lot of townships around, and townships had been a part of the State Department of Transportation because of all the township roads, and there was a need to have an association to be able to speak on behalf of the larger group.
Are you going to have some type of party or some type of meeting? How will the township recognize its own anniversary?
Well, we are. The association, we had originally intended to do it in April, closer to the actual anniversary date, but our annual conference had to be postponed because of pandemic restrictions. But we are, in fact, having a centennial celebration on October 14. Down at the Hershey Lodge, and then on the 15th we'll have our business meeting. So we're looking forward to having hundreds of people coming together to celebrate and mark 100 years of history.
And you get to be the host of the whole event, don't you?
We will, but we're going to have a couple special guests. So we'd.
Can you talk about them? Or you prefer not to?
One
I'm
is,
putting you on the spot.
No.
I'm sorry, Dave.
We're going to have a president of the United States visiting with us.
Aha. Well, that narrows it down a little bit. Oh my goodness, I'm excited about this now. Well, can you tell us a little bit more? You talked about the beginning of the association, but how about the laws that govern townships at that time? There's a great difference now between the laws that govern the townships today versus 100 years ago. Can you talk about that for a second?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think as we sit here today in Pennsylvania, having 117,000 miles of roads, recognizing that 2/3 of those roads are operated and maintained by local governments and mostly townships, even within that. And the state only maintains about 40,000 miles of roads. And that was similar to the case back then, that local roads were where all the transactions and transportation was taking place. The state made an attempt to take over all those local roads, which I think in hindsight fortunately failed. Because I think people score their local roads, they feel a lot more comfortable with knowing that they can call a township supervisor to get a pothole filled than trying to call Harrisburg and reach the governor or Secretary of Transportation or somebody else on a state highway system. So it was initially all about roads and that transportation infrastructure, and that's a word we hear a lot today. Is still very much part of it, but there have been so many things that have been layered on to township government over the course of the last 100 years. Some good, some bad, but a lot of mandates coming from Washington and Harrisburg, and unfortunately most of them unfunded mandates coming from Harrisburg and Washington.
What are the differences between the services that the association provides to the townships and the townships provide?
Well, I think the townships provide services to the residents, transportation, water, sewer, recreation, basic services, the needs that the people need to be able to survive in a community. Our job as an association is to help them do their job better. So we do that through education and information sharing and advocacy. So we become their advocate on the Hill, both in Washington and Harrisburg. But most importantly, share best practices and facilitate collaboration and interaction between members from all across Pennsylvania who share the same kinds of problems and concerns. And they all, at the end of the day, want to provide affordable government, effective affordable government at a good price.
Mm-hmm. Well, over the last 100 years, township governments themselves, I imagine the structure, the organization, the responsibilities has changed in several ways. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think that, well, the responsibilities have expanded as more and more people want more and more services. We find people moving from urban areas into the suburban or rural areas, and because they like the lower taxes, and they like safe communities, and they like affordable schools. But oftentimes when they get there, they want to have all of the cost drivers that made their flight from the urban center replicated in their new community. So that becomes a challenge. But our communities still provide safe communities and good quality education, and they're great places to live, work, and raise families.
Well, you've heard this before. I wondered how you respond to this. There are some people around the Commonwealth who say we have too many levels of government. How do you respond to that that argument?
Well, I think what they usually follow that with is bigger is better. And I usually counter that with the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And in reality, as we see I mean, small localized government is far more efficient. It's a lot easier to go to your town hall or township building to visit with the township supervisor to raise an issue than it is to reach into a county courthouse or a state legislature or to Washington. I mean, you can't pick up the phone and call the governor or the president. You can see the township supervisor, and you may see him at the grocery store or the ball field or a church or the post office. So it's a more responsive level of government, and the bigger ones they just cost more.
Mm-hmm. Oh my! I've been at the point in my life where I had to get my Medicare card, and Medicare sent me my card, and it has the wrong date. It has me starting next year, and so to try to get it changed has been impossible. It would have been wonderful to go down to the township office and simply speak to someone directly, and I think that would have been done, Dave.
Yep.
I think it's a good example of what you're saying.
Sure. The efficiency and affordability at the local level is second to none. Look, we all look at Harrisburg and Washington and look how at the bureaucracies in each of those towns, and look at the current harsh partisan divides that you see in each of those towns. And the reality is those kinds of things don't exist in local governments and local government communities. And that you have, Republicans, Democrats who serve on township councils and boards of supervisors and borough halls, and they get along. They often do things with a unanimous vote. There's not a Republican or Democrat way to fill a pothole or to pick up trash or turn the water on.
Right, very much so. Well, tell us a little bit about it. Of course, you can't escape it. All we hear about anymore is the pandemic and vaccines. Has the pandemic affected the way that township governments are operating over the last year and a half?
Well, I think that's one of the things that's interesting to note about that is that while a lot of people stayed home and had to change their commuting patterns and where they worked and how they worked, township government they still had to deliver the goods. People still wanted roads plowed and potholes filled. They still wanted their trash picked up. They still wanted to know the local parks were open. They still wanted to know when they flushed that things went away, when they turned on the tap that it filled up. And all of those municipal services were still had to be provided. And local government, like many other frontline workers, stayed on the job. But we also took advantage of using the technology to make local government more accessible to more people with some of the technology that allows you to do remote meetings. People are able to participate from the convenience of their home without the risk of traveling. Now, the downside of that has been a lot less fuel has been purchased, and there's a lot less revenue to help maintain that highway infrastructure.
Do the townships have any record at all of the usage of local parks? Because I imagine over the last year and a half, one can just guess that has been in demand and that should be on an upsurge. But is that true? Do you have any stats on that?
I think I would point actually probably to the piggyback onto the state Secretary Dunn at DCNR, Conservation Natural Resources, provided some interesting data as to the use levels of the state park system. And I would say that those use levels were also replicated at the county and municipal park levels, and that we see today and for the past several months, I mean, record participations, record levels of crowds at community sporting events or community days or fall festivals. People want to get out. People want to be safe, but they want to interact with their fellow human beings.
I think so too. Well, what does speaking of this 100-year time span, what does the future of local government look like in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Dave? And you're someone who would know. You've been, not only have you had this position, but you've had many positions in state government. And so if there's one person who's had a good picture of the whole scheme, it's you.
You're right. I have had the blessed opportunity to participate in government at a variety of different levels, from the state to the county to the local, and local government is where it happens, where most gets done, and where it's most efficient. There are always folks that are going to try and eliminate local government and focus at the county or state level. So those challenges will always be out there, but with those challenges come opportunities. And I would say the future of local government is bright. Our greatest challenges are in front of us, but so are our greatest victories.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've had 100 years looking into the future. Maybe not that you may not know what your priorities are going to be for the next 100 years, but what do you think your priorities of the association will be for the next year to 5 years, Dave?
I think the priorities of our association will be to help our members do their job and meet the expectations of their residents and their voters. And those expectations are to provide quality government at an affordable price, and to keep common sense first and foremost, and prove that just because you watch TV and what happens in Washington and Harrisburg, that the common sense really does still exist, and it's alive and well in local communities. And our job will be to help foster that, and to reassure Pennsylvanians that their brightest days lie ahead as well.
Mm-hmm. And you'll be working with the state legislature on many parts of this program. How do you characterize your current relationship, or the association's current relationship with the legislature in our last minute?
Sure. The relationship with the legislature is strong. There's a lot of new members. There's a lot of members who come from local government. There's a lot of members who interact with local residents and are not part of the old traditional bureaucracies of how you go about to become a legislature. So I think we are closer to than ever in recent years to having a true citizen legislature, that folks who come to do good things for the right reasons, and we enjoy working with them and look forward to doing good things for Pennsylvanians.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that talked about citizen legislature, like our good friend Dr. James Broussard from Lebanon Valley College, who's left us just recently. And yeah, it's good to hear that concept isn't lost
Sure.
altogether. Well, Dave, thank you very much for being with us again.
Thank you.
We congratulate you and the association on its anniversary, and hope that your celebration goes fantastically.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. We'll
All right.
see you again soon.
All right. Thanks.
And we'll see you again next week on Behind the Headlines. Tune in. We'll see you then.